I want to talk about an IRS tax form that even if you're a seasoned tax resolution professional, you may never have heard of. Now, we've all heard of Form 656. The 656 form is what you use when you make an offer and compromise, which is a deal that the IRS or a program that the IRS has set up to where you can make a deal to settle for less. A Form 657 is a form that a revenue officer can send to the COIC unit, which is the centralized offer and compromise unit, to indicate that in the revenue officer's opinion, the offer has been submitted solely for the purposes of delay. Now, I emphasize that word solely because I think it's really important. Solely to a lawyer means exclusively, the only reason, the exclusive reason that an offer was submitted was to delay and obstruct collection efforts. And we simply don't do that. Yet I've seen this form 2 times in my career. Now, one time was with a revenue officer who he and I went back and forth for a couple days, in that he insisted that the offer amount just simply was not enough. To which I replied to him that that was not his job. He didn't have the jurisdiction or authority to decide if the offer was enough. That was centralized OIC, and then subsequently whichever offer specialist or offer examiner that worked the offer. Now, in that case, instead of raising a big stink, we did increase the amount of the offer. He actually agreed with the new and improved offer amount, and we got the offer to go through, at least without him filing a Form 657. And ultimately, the offer was accepted and the taxpayer got a great deal. Now, recently, I saw it again, and now I've only seen it twice in over 25 years of doing this type of work. So that tells you it's pretty rare. And both of these revenue officers I was really familiar with, and they should have been familiar with the fact that I don't file offers solely for purposes of delay. In fact, we win over 80% of our offers here at my firm. And so that track record alone tells you that we don't file offers solely for the purposes of delay. But in this case, the revenue officer decided that, again, he didn't think the offer amount was sufficient. And so he was going to go ahead and file a 657. Now, it's important to know that when the 657 gets issued, there is no due process after that point. The offer unit simply wraps it up in a nice little bow and returns it to the taxpayer. No appeal rights. There's nothing you can do about this, except there was something that I was able to do. I was able to get a copy of the 657 from the revenue officer, and then I went through the Internal Revenue Manual, and it spent about half a day writing a letter to the manager, the group manager. I sent the letter to the group manager, and then I said, "Hey, can you give me a call the day after you read this," or something like that. And she did call, and she said to me, "I can see why you were so upset. And that's because I had submitted what's called an offer and compromise based on effective tax administration. Effective tax administration stands for the proposition that the taxpayer theoretically can afford to pay, but it would be unfair to cause him to do so." And so it was an error basically for the 657 to be issued. And also, if you look at the Internal Revenue Manual sections that deal with Form 657, there's a whole laundry list and examples of indicators that the offer was submitted solely for the purposes of delay, and none of those were present. And so ultimately, we're going to be able to resubmit the offer. In this case, it was good because there was no down payment and no filing fee, because taxpayer was already somewhat indigent, very low income, and so it didn't end up mattering that much. But when I went to look for more information on IRS Form 67, there wasn't anything on the internet, or very little. And there were certainly no videos. So I wanted to prepare this video, tell you what my experience was with regard to the IRS Form 657, and just share this information so that if you run into it, you at least have some idea of how to combat this form. I think it's unconstitutional. I think it's wrong. I don't think a revenue officer should have the authority or ability to simply fill out a form and strike a pen and remove due process from a taxpayer. But that appears to be where we're at today in today's IRS. Thanks for watching.